This is one of those true stories that if someone told you this happened to them, you'd think they were crazy. But it actually happened to a real person, and it will haunt me for the rest of my life. It's the story of the ghost in Leyte. And this is the scariest ghost story I've ever come across. I was working in an office job. My fiancé at the time worked just up the road from us, so we decided to move in together. We moved into a 2-bedroom apartment complex. The bedrooms were quite large and split level. The master bedroom was upstairs with a spiral staircase leading to it, and downstairs there was a smaller second bedroom. Our apartment complex had an intercom system where you could buzz your visitors into the building, and they could buzz you from the security door inside. One night about 2 a.m., I was woken up by the sound of our buzzer being pressed. Now, this would usually be our neighbors who came home late. Our neighbor was a police officer who worked night shift. He was a nice guy, and he was always apologizing because he was so loud coming home drunk at 2 a.m. So I assumed that it must be him. But when I answered the buzzer, no one was there. I got up, went to the front door and looked out. All I could see was our front garden and the side of the other apartment next to ours. There was no one there. I went back to bed and fell asleep again. But about 10 minutes later, the buzzer rang again. Again I answered it, and it was still no one there. I started getting really creeped out. I don't know how many times it buzzed that night, but each time I answered, no one was there. My fiancé slept through all of this, but I didn't want to wake him up, because I was worried that if I woke him up and then nothing happened when he went to check, then I'd look like a psycho crazy girlfriend who was making stuff up. So I just kept checking the peephole every time the buzzer rang, just hoping that maybe I'd see something. Anyone there or anything, but I saw nothing. I ended up sitting on the floor next to the door for most of the night, just waiting for sunrise. When the sun finally came up, I felt a little better. I checked the outside again, and still nothing. At this point, my fiancé was awake now, and I told him what was happening. Thought it was pretty funny. He said, "Hey, we've got a ghost." Of course, I wasn't really finding it funny. I told him that I wanted to get out of that apartment as soon as possible. We made plans to move out later that year. We never did end up finding out who was buzzing us that night, but after that, it never happened again. The strange thing is, it was only me that heard the buzzer. My fiancé slept right through it, and after we moved out, our new neighbors also told us that they had heard the same buzzer at 2 a.m. as well, but only after we had already moved out. So I know what you're thinking. What's so scary about a ghost buzzer? Well, here's the thing. A few months after we had moved out of that apartment, we were hanging out with some friends one night, and we asked them if they had ever experienced anything weird or paranormal. They were telling us their stories, and one of our friends told us about his experience. He had been living in an apartment in Leyte years ago. One day his electricity suddenly cut out. No big deal, right? Just a power cut? But then he noticed that the lights in the stairwell of the apartment building were flickering. And then he heard footsteps. Now, these were not normal footsteps. These sounded like dragging footsteps, like someone or something dragging itself up the stairs. And then he heard a voice, a low voice, deep and raspy, and it was saying water. And then the voice stopped. And our friend, the one telling the story, was like, "Yeah." So I thought, okay, maybe I'm hearing things. I should probably go and check it out. So we got up, grabbed a baseball bat, and went to check it out. He went to the stairwell, and he started looking up the stairs, and he started listening. And he heard the dragging footsteps again, followed by the voice saying, "Water." He said he was frozen in fear, and he just stood there listening. And then the footsteps came closer. And as he turned around to look, he could see the silhouette of an old man dragging himself up the stairs towards him. He said the old man was very thin and emaciated, and he had no face. And as he got closer, he could see that he was dragging himself with one hand. And in the other hand, he had a rusty metal can. And he said the old man got closer and closer, and he was so scared that he took a swing with the baseball bat and hit the old man on the head. The old man screamed, and he ran away. Then our friend called the police and told them what had happened. But the police didn't really believe him. They just thought he was some drug addict who had seen a homeless person and then hit him with a baseball bat. Of course, our friend insisted that he hadn't done that. He told them about the ghost and the voice asking for water. The police just laughed at him and left, said that he never reported the incident again because he knew no one would believe him. And he didn't want to seem like some crazy crackpot calling the cops all the time. And then he stopped the story there. I couldn't help myself. I asked him, "So what happened then?" He said, "Well, I never saw him again." But sometimes at night, I swear I hear footsteps in the stairwell, and I hear a voice saying, "Water." And I always think it's him. When he finished his story, there was a long silence. No one said anything for a moment. And then I said, "Wait a minute. Are you saying that that ghost lives in the apartment building that I just moved out of?" And our friend said, "Yeah, that's the one that I used to live in." And then it hit me. This was the exact same apartment building that we had lived in. I was stunned. I couldn't believe it. I had literally moved out of that apartment a few months earlier. And according to this guy, that ghost had been living there for years. I started thinking, what if that ghost had followed me? What if that's why it was buzzing my apartment at 2 a.m.? Was it trying to tell me something? Was it warning me? Was it trying to get me to leave? Why was it asking for water? Why did it only come at 2 a.m.? And then I remembered that our apartment was the only one in the whole building that didn't have air conditioning. It was the only one with windows that didn't open. It was always freezing cold in there. In the summer, we had to use electric blankets to keep warm. We joked about it all the time, how we lived in an ice cube. And I realized then that maybe that ghost wanted us to turn the heat on. Maybe it was trying to warn me, and I got scared. What if I had turned the heater on that night? What if I had fallen asleep and that ghost had managed to get into our apartment? As I sat there thinking about it, my skin started tingling, and I could feel goosebumps popping up everywhere. And then I could feel something cold brush against my arm, like a breath of cold air. I started panicking. I jumped up and looked around the room, but of course there was nothing there. I told our friends about the buzzing and how I never saw anyone, but I could hear our ghost wanting me to turn the heater on. They all thought it was pretty funny, but I was too scared to laugh. I started feeling sick to my stomach. And then one of our other friends said, "Hey, let's change the subject because I don't want to freak anyone out." I was so relieved. I didn't want anyone to think that I was crazy. I didn't want them to think that I was making all of this up. And as the night went on, I started to calm down a little. But I haven't been able to forget it. Every time I think about it, I can feel my heart starting to race, and I start sweating. To this day, I don't know if that ghost wanted me to turn the heater on that night, if it was trying to warn me, or if it was just lonely and wanted some company. But I do know that if I ever hear the sound of an old man dragging himself up a set of stairs, I won't stick around to find out who it is. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to hear more scary ghost stories, stay tuned for more content. Thanks for watching.